So today we're going to talk some Necrons. Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. We've got a Necrons video today where we're going to be discussing the pros and cons of every detachment available to the Necrons faction. Of course we've got 5 detachments, so we're going to go through the 5, go through the strengths, go through the weaknesses or pros and cons, whatever you want to call it, and give us a better understanding, especially to those newer players joining the Necron community, give them a better understanding of what Necrons are all about. So before getting into this video today guys, make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are new around here. And if you want to join other communities, we've got the Discord. If you want to jump on the Discord, you can ask your own questions, you can show your lists, show your painting and all that kind of stuff. We've also just recently opened a Facebook group as well. That'll also be in the link down below. I'm posting daily pictures. Don't know if you can see it in the background on the table, maybe not. There's a giant pyramid I've just painted up. Taken me a while. Also guys, before getting into today's video, we do have a sponsor for this video. Check this out. So TwoTrees have sent out their latest 3D printer to review, the SK1 Core XY. Now before I say anything else, you need to know that this printer is self-leveling and can be used wirelessly. These two things sell it to me. After my adventures with the flat pack design printer, this is genuinely awesome. As I've said before, I'm not that technical. What I want to do is just take it out the box, plug it in, and that's me kind of done. And this printer is literally what that is. After the unpacking, there was a small display to attach and a couple of safety screws to remove, and that's about it. Now on the TwoTrees website, they've actually got tutorials available. So if you do get stuck with anything, help will be there for you. The other thing that jumped out to me is how easy it is to load the filament. You just push it up into this little pipe and away you go. I'll tell you a little bit more of the techie features. It's got a maximum print speed of 700 mil per second. It's the first Z-tilt auto leveling feature on the market. It's got the auto calibration with vibration compensation. It's got clipper firmware, which is faster and more stable, and a larger printing size of 256 mil squared. This printer retails currently at $574, but guess what? We have got a Planet 40k discount code. You type in NBSK, which brings me on to how well this product has actually been designed. It feels totally solid and very sturdy. They put their little TwoTrees logos on things for the filaments fall. It just feels like they've really thought about the design, the usability, and people like me that just don't really know what they're doing. And in fact, I've got some bases I can show you now what I've just been messing around with. I've got a 90mm base, a couple of 50mm bases. I don't know if that comes up on the camera well enough. Never does. But yeah, that's, if I can do that and I'm not very technical, then literally anyone can do this. There's a couple of 50mm. And yeah, you can be putting that and applying it to all of your models by 3D printing the bases. So if you want to get your hands on your own 3D printer, this is the one for you. SK1 from TwoTrees 3D printer. The link will be down in the description down below. Have a look. Anyway, today we're talking about pros and cons for each detachment. Right, let's start this off with the Awakened Dynasty. I like to call it the Index Dynasty. The dynasty that we started with when the actual edition began. So I'm going to quickly go over the detachment rule. Basically, if you've got a unit that is being led by a character, you get a +1 to the hit roll. Straightforward stuff, easy peasy. So let's jump into these pros and cons for this detachment then. So the first pro I've got, well, it's a simple clean ability. There's no FAQs required in the Hypercrypt Legion. There's a few iffy parts to it. You've got iffy parts, well, they've sort of fixed the Obeisance Phalanx. There was an iffy part with that, with the Triarch keyword. But the Awakened Dynasty detachment rule is fairly straightforward. If you've got a leader leading a unit, a +1 to the hit roll. It's very straightforward, nice and easy for beginners. The second pro is you basically get double buffs for your leaders. Now what I mean by that is, let's say you've got an Overlord and a unit of Immortals. Not only are you going to be getting the buff from Command Protocols, a +1 to the hit roll, but you're also going to be gaining the benefits or the bonuses from that character that applies his ability to the unit. Whether it's Mine Will Be Done as an example. If you've got the Chronomancer, you're going to get a -1 to hit penalty if you're getting targeted, and so on. So the characters are kind of bringing double bonuses to every unit that they jump in. The third pro I've got for the Awakened Dynasty is the Canoptek Wraiths can be led. The reason I've pinpointed out the Canoptek race because I believe they're the best unit at present for Necrons in 10th edition. They're fairly priced, extremely durable. They can be led by a Technomancer, which is kind of new with this codex, and he applies the 5+ Fear No Pain save. So not only have they got a 4+ invulnerable save, not only have they got a 5+ Fear No Pain save, they're toughness 6, they've got 4 wounds apiece. They can fight, they can shoot, they're very fast. Their ability actually throws out mortal wounds when they overlap a unit, when they jump over a unit. They're pretty decent, so the fact that they can now be led by a Technomancer is brilliant for this dynasty in particular, or this detachment, because they get a +1 to their hit roll, which means they'll be hitting on 3s. That's with their melee weapons. The fourth pro I've got here is the stratagems. They're very balanced. They're not just one-sided. You've got some shooty stuff, you've got some durability stuff, you've got some melee stuff. In the melee one, you've got the Hungry Void. The shooty one, you've got the Command Protocol of Conquering Tyrant or Vengeful Stars. The durability stuff, you've got it used to be Eternal Guardian, I always get it mixed up, Eternal Revenant, as well as Undying Legion. So there's a bit of everything in this detachment. Again, if you're a new player, having a nice balanced stratagem list of 6 stratagems is quite nice and easy to remember. When you get into the more, I wouldn't say difficult detachments, but the more competitive detachments, these stratagems kind of go into a bit of more of a advanced tactic and advanced combo. So as a beginner you may not see those combinations, but with this detachment they're quite easy to spot. And finally, the enhancements. They're pretty competitive. You've got the Veil of Darkness, which we all love. They've got the Enigmatic Dermal Bond for the 4+ Fear No Pain save. We can't use it on the Transcendent Katana anymore, but you could use it on the Command Barge. The Command Barge, I think it's a little bit of a forgotten unit. I do want to start playing the Command Barge a little bit more. But you can have a 4+ Fear No Pain save on that. It's also got the Advanced Quantum Shielding as well, so it will be quite a durable model, 4+ invulnerable save as well. And there's the Aura, which is the Phasal Subjugator for the +1 to hit for units nearby. I need to reread the actual wording of that because I know they recently changed it with the index, with the Codex rather. So it's best that I check. Yeah, it's just a +1 to hit roll. It used to be something a little bit different. Doesn't include characters anymore, but they usually hit on 2s anyway. Don't really need it that much. I mean, maybe if they've got a negative modifier to their hit roll, then they would need it, but they can't use it with this enhancement. But what it means is you can bump up Doomstalkers, you can bump up Doomsday Arcs if they've moved. They probably don't want to move, but if they have moved, you can bump up Locust Heavy Destroyers with the Destructors if they have moved, because their heavy will get cancelled out. Things like that. There's uses for that enhancement. That's the main pros I've got for this dynasty, this detachment. The cons, not all units can be led. There's only certain amount of units. What we got: Warriors, Immortals, Locust Destroyers, Locust Heavy Destroyers, Lich Guard. This is off the top of my head now. What are we missing there? Are we missing one? Wraiths, of course, Wraiths. But other than that, I think everything else isn't going to be led unless you're using that enhancement. They're not going to gain the benefits from the actual detachment. So like Death Marks as an example, Praetorians, Spiders, all the other kind of units won't be gaining anything because they simply can't be led without the enhancement, and you can only have one of the enhancement as well. So if they're not within that aura, they're not going to gain the benefits. So there's a slight con there. Second con, I've got character tax. When you're putting a unit within your list, let's say you go with those Necron Immortals, which I always forget how much they are. I always say 70 or are they 80? I always get it mixed up. Let's double check that as well. 70. I was right the first time. So when you get your 70 points with your Immortals with your list, that isn't where it ends. You then need to, well, that's for 5 in fact. You really want 10 for 140. You then need to make sure you've got a character in there. The cheapest character I think is a Royal Warden for 40 points. That's a cheap method of getting command protocols. But then you start to bump it up. You start to think, well, I could get an Overlord, I can get a Chronomancer, I can get a Plasmancer. Maybe you want 2. So there's definitely going to be a tax with the characters. You can't really go bare bones with this detachment. There's just no point. You may as well choose another detachment. Third con, doesn't benefit the characters so much. We kind of alluded to it already, but they normally hit on 2s. So within their own unit, forget the enhancement because you can't do it, but if they're within their own unit, +1 to the hit roll, and you've got, say, an Overlord in there, the Overlord's already hitting on 2s, so it doesn't really benefit those characters. I mean, maybe if it's got the Void Scythe, which is a melee weapon, and that's the Overlord without the Translocation Shroud as well. That will put it to a 2+, but normally they're already hitting on the 2+, so it doesn't really do anything for the Overlord, just the unit in question. And finally, I'm just going to mention this here, the Canoptek Court just offers more for the units that are being led. Again, Warriors, Immortals, Wraiths are the main ones there. All of those units can be led in the Canoptek Court, and they'll probably have a lot more in terms of damage output. So that's got to be a con for this detachment. So next up we've got the Annihilation Legion, which their ability is basically get to reroll your charge roll, and if the unit that you're charging is under half strength, you get a +1 to that charge. That second part to that detachment roll is kind of stinky, if I'm honest with you. If they're under half strength, they're probably dead anyway. You don't really need, I suppose a +1 to the charge is okay, but you want to get in, don't you? Maybe it's not bad, but I don't like those under half strength abilities. If it was half strength, it would be better, but under half strength is kind of annoying. If you've got a 6-man unit, you need to kill 4 just to get that +1 to the charge. You have to be left on 2 because that's under half strength. 3 isn't enough because that's exactly half strength. So I'm not massively keen on the second part of that ability, but that is what it is. Pros, great for theme list, non-competitive games, friendly games where you just throw a list together of destroyers, flayed ones, loads of fun. If you're not too worried about the result of the game, you're just there to roll dice, perfect. The Annihilation Legion is definitely up there with fun. That's number 1. Number 2, works with flayed ones. Works with the flayed ones, maybe because they realised there wasn't that many destroyer melee units that can actually interact with this attachment roll, so they've added the flayed ones in there, giving them a bit more of a role within the Codex. That's good, because flayed ones are pretty cheap. I'm going to double check what they are. I'm going to guess, I always guess this wrong, I'm going to guess 70. I got it right again, lovely. I should be getting it right anyway, so yeah, I shouldn't be too proud of that. 70 points for an Infiltrator's unit, maybe it's something to get you up the board, I don't know. I'm not really that keen on flayed ones this edition, to be honest with you, but they can work with this detachment rule. Third of all, you got the rerollable charge, as we mentioned, with the detachment rule itself, because who doesn't like rerollable charges with a melee-based faction? It's pretty good. It's pretty, it gets you into engagement range, which is where these guys want to be. The Scorbit Destroyers in particular, maybe even the Ophidian Destroyers, they want to be in a fight, not only in your phase or in your fight phase, but in your opponent's fight phase too. So they've got at least one fight phase once they're in, possibly 2, and hopefully you've destroyed the unit in your opponent's turn so that you can go and charge a completely separate unit. That's the pros, not many there really. Cons, useless for shooter units. The detachment roll for rerolling your charge roll isn't going to really help a Locust Destroyer unit. It's not going to really help a Hexmark Destroyer, a Locust Heavy Destroyer. It's not going to help any of them, so it's not that great for them, and half of the Destroyer units are shooty. So I think they've missed a trick here. I think they've just thrown, they've put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5 for this detachment. I think they could have done a lot better with the detachment rule. Unfortunately, they have dropped slightly short. Second con, under half strength kind of sucks. I kind of said this already when we were talking about the intro of this detachment. You've got to get them, if a 6-man unit needs to be put down to 2 before you can make any use of that second part of the detachment rule. It also interacts with one of the stratagems as well, where you get to get a +1 to the wound roll if they're under half strength. Again, I'm not a big fan of this under half strength business. It's just not for me. The enhancements are pretty mediocre. I mean, you've got the Soulless Reaper, that is okay. It stops short of potentially prevents your opponent from falling back from a unit on a roll of, I think it's a 4+. Nope, it's on a 3+. And they won't be able to fall back, which is good because it means in your opponent's fight phase, you're going to be fighting. You're going to be fighting that unit and you've got a chance of clearing them off. And again, you then can get your, let's say it's your Scorbit Destroyers, you can move out 8 inches, you've got a potential 12-inch movement, maybe even consolidated as well before all that even happens. So yeah, 8-inch movement, 12-inch potential charge, and away to a new unit. The stratagems aren't really much better. I mean, you've got Spore of Frailty. That's the one where you are getting the +1 to hit at under full strength and a +1 to wound under half strength. I don't like those abilities, but a +1 to wound is nice if you can get it off. It's just when are you going to get it off, and what unit are you going for to get this off? Like if you've got a 5-man Space Marine unit, there's only going to be 2 left. It's not that difficult to kill 2 Space Marines. If you've got a 20-man, I don't know, anything that comes in 20s, and you've got 9 remaining, they're going to be 1 wound models. So a lot of your weapons that are damage 2 aren't going to really apply. Maybe your exterminators with the Locust Heavy Destroyers, but they don't really need the +1. They're already going to kill them. So it doesn't come up that often in my opinion. You've also got the Mask of Death, which is a -1 to hit penalty. It's a bit meh. It's okay. The stratagems in general are just a bit so-so. Most of the Codex doesn't benefit from the detachment rule because most of the Codex is not destroyers or flayed ones. So you're really kind of penned into using those specific units. That doesn't mean you can't take Death Marks or you can't take a Catan. You can, of course you still can, but they're just not going to gain the bonuses. If you've only got a few units within your list that are going to gain the bonuses, then you need to ask yourself, why am I taking this detachment? You may as well take the Hypercrypt Legion. That will apply to all units in the Codex. So yeah, it's when it only applies to certain units, you've got to go make sure you've taken loads of those units. But when you do, you've penned yourself in. Your game plan is predictable. Everyone knows you're going to have 3 units of Scorpion Destroyers with Scorpion Lords. They're going to be run out the battlefield. You're going to have your Locust Heavy Destroyers at the back. You're going to have your Locust Destroyers in the middle. Maybe some Aphelion Destroyers doing the secondary objectives, popping in and out. It's very predictable. Everyone knows what you're going to do. There's no shenanigans. There's no Hypercrypt, hyperphasing stuff. There's no Veil of Darkness stuff. There's no Monolith. Well, you could use a Monolith actually. You could use a Monolith, and I think I've put it off in the past. A Monolith could work with this detachment because you've got the... What's that? Is it the Dimensional Corridor stratagem when you can charge from the Eternity Gate? Maybe that would actually work with this detachment. I've not really thought about it hard enough. Finally, you're just relying on Scorpion Destroyers realistically, and they're not high damage dealers. Let's double check these Scorpion Destroyers again. I know they're only strength 7 nowadays, aren't they? And only 2 damage. So now they've sort of become a anti-infantry killer. Whereas in the previous edition, they literally could kill a knight, because the toughness massively went up in this edition. So that's the Annihilation Legion. Let's move into the Canoptek Court. One of my favourite ones here. Not my favourite, but one of. It's very competitive. One of the most competitive, if not the most competitive. It's the strongest attachment in my opinion that we've got. All relates to Canoptek units and Cryptek units. So you've got this power matrix thing. If you weren't aware, if you're new to Necrons or the Codex, your home objective is part of your power matrix, and any objectives you hold within your no man's land, if you can control at least half of them, then the no man's land is your power matrix, and if you can control at least half of the objectives in the enemy deployment zone, that will also be your power matrix. Now the entire army or the entire detachment gets to reroll 1s to hit, but if you're within your power matrix area, you get to reroll all the hit rolls, not just once, which is fantastic because there's a number of Canoptek units. There's loads of Canoptek units, in fact. You've got all the Forge World stuff, you've got the Wraiths, the Spiders, the Scarabs, the Doomstalker, which will have its rerolls even with the Overwatch ability that it has. You've got Crypteks as well count, so if you add a Cryptek to an Immortal unit, the Immortals will get the ability. You add a Cryptek to the Warrior units, they'll gain the ability. So there's lots of units in question here that can gain from the power matrix, which is really cool. They've also established from the new rules commentary that you're going to be contesting objectives at the end of every single phase, even if they've been sticky. So some units in the game, like Traz and the Infinite, have this ability where they can sticky an objective, they can leave the objective, and if you look closely at the wording, they keep it until the end of the turn, which means you won't be turning on your power matrix until the end of your turn, which kind of sucks because you need it within your turn, but they've actually changed that now. It'll be checked on a phase by phase basis, end of every phase. So end of the movement phase, if you're on it, that's when they check it, bang, it's now yours. Power matrix is unlocked. So that's something that they have changed within the rules commentary. So yeah, faction wide, you're re-rolling ones. That's going to be really good in general, just amplifying just giving you more volume in terms of your shots, in terms of your wound rolls, and then ultimately your damage rolls. So it's a massive amplifier for damage in general. There's an option within the enhancement which is very good, which is infiltrators, which is actually called, not infiltrators, it's called something, isn't it? What's it called? What's it called? I've not got a note for it. Why have I not got a note for it? Let's get into the actual... It's called Dimensional Sanctum. There we go. You can put the Dimensional Sanctum on for 20 points, and you can give a unit Infiltrate. It could be Wraiths with the Technomancer taking the enhancement. It could be Immortals with the Cryptek. It could be Warriors with the Cryptek. But you can give one of those units Infiltration or Infiltrators, which could potentially unlock your power matrix nice and early. In some map types, you've got the No Man's Land objectives. Some of them are quite further than others, depending on your deployment and all that kind of stuff. So maybe if you can infiltrate some Wraiths onto the furthest point in the No Man's Land, as long as you're more than 9 inches away from enemy units in the deployment zone, you can take it. Then get another unit onto the nearby No Man's Land objective, then you've got 2. That should be enough. Sometimes that should be enough really. As long as you've got 2, you're pretty much done with your power matrix in the No Man's Land. You're re-rolling all your hit rolls, which is good. Then finally, in terms of pros, the stratagems are pretty good. They're pretty good. You've got Curse of the Cryptek, which is such an underrated stratagem. If you lose a Cryptek model, you pop this for 1 CP, and then army-wide, anything that killed your Cryptek, you get a +1 to hit and a +1 to wound. Bearing in mind that you're already re-rolling all your hit rolls, potentially, you're definitely re-rolling 1s, but now you've got a +1. But a +1 to wound can be actually quite brutal. If you've got, say, some Immortals that are Strength 5, going up against something that's Toughness 9, you would normally need 5s, but now all of a sudden you need 4s. It's almost like having Strength 9 Tesla Carbines in a way, because you're wounded on 4s now, which is good. Which is really good because they actually re-roll all their wound rolls as well. So it's fantastic. That's only one of the stratagems. You've got Devastating Wounds as an option. Only really works now with the Canoptek Wraiths, but that is an option. The Reactive Subroutines, I like that one. You can, if an enemy unit gets within 9 inches, you get to move away 6 inches with a Canoptek unit. That could be your Doomstalker potentially. It could be your Wraiths getting closer or just penning something in to prevent more movement. And there's also the other one, which is basically gives you Lone Operative. I believe it is called Counter-Temporal Shift. It gives a unit Lone Operative. Got to get within 12 inches to fire. That could be really useful on a lone Doomstalker. Can't take any fire from Tau units that are firing in, Astra Militarum that are firing in from far. Yeah, you can't do it because you need to get within 12. Cool. That's the pros. What about the cons? There are only a couple because it's a decent detachment. Non-Canoptek and Cryptek units gain pretty much nothing. So your Catan don't really gain anything, Death Marks don't gain anything, and so on. If you've not got a Canoptek keyword in there or a Cryptek model in there, then you gain absolutely nothing. Not great. And the second con is the enhancements are only for Cryptek models. So you are basically getting a Cryptek tax. If you want to take like an Overlord in an Immortal unit, you're going to need a Cryptek as well. So there is a tax on those Cryptek models. So that was the Canoptek Court. Let's move into the Obeisance Phalanx. Starting off with the actual detachment rule. So you're basically targeting an enemy unit in your command phase, and if your unit has got the Lich Guard keyword, the Overlord keyword, or the Tryout keyword, you're going to get a +1 to the wound roll against that selected unit. That's a pretty powerful ability. It's a pretty good damage amplifier really, because there's lots of combinations. I'd say this was quite an advanced detachment to play. Beginners can get grasp of it, don't get me wrong, but the synergy is a little bit more advanced than, say, the Awakened Dynasty. So yeah, you've got the damage amplifier, you've also got combinations with the Silent King. Now the Silent King doesn't have the Overlord keyword, he doesn't have the Tryout keyword. Very strange that he doesn't. But he's got his own amplifiers with his Tryout ability. He gives rerolls of 1s to hit and rerolls of 1s to wound, as an example, one of his options. So when you add that alongside a +1 to the wound roll, rerolling 1s, and maybe it's Immortals that are rerolling everything, but now they're re-rolling ones to hit as well. There's just loads of little bits of synergy you can do. 20 Necron Warriors with the Ghost Reapers with lethal hits, re-rolling the ones, and now they're re-rolling ones to wound, and it's a +1 to the wound roll as well with their strength 4. There's a lot you can do. I like the Enslaved Artifice stratagem, which gives critical hits on a 5+. It basically acts like a Plasmancer for a turn, or for a phase. Doesn't work on Titanic models, but again, this could be Necron Warriors. The combo I've just literally spoken about, but now you're going to get lethal hits on a 5+. Maybe you're re-rolling the ones because of the Silent King, and so on. So there's a massive damage amplifier again. You could stick that on like a Chronomancer, and he'll give you the abilities that a Chronomancer has, but also give you the abilities that a Plasmancer has without actually having or paying for a Plasmancer. So there's some cool stuff you can do there. And as we already mentioned, you can use Immortals, Warriors. All you need to do that, you need to stick an Overlord in those units. An Overlord could also go with Lichguard, but Lichguard have already got the Lichguard keyword. They don't need it. Immortals and Warriors don't have Lichguard keywords. They don't have the Overlord keyword or Triac keyword. But by putting the Overlord in the unit, all of a sudden they do. So they'll be gaining the bonuses, just like all the other ones that have it. Cons. Once that unit has been destroyed, the targeted unit, the ability is kind of redundant until your next turn. So it's a one and done kind of thing, which isn't the worst thing, but I'm just letting you know as a con. You've got the Overlord tax. If you've not got the Overlords within your Immortals and Warriors units, then there's just no point doing it. You may as well to make use of the detachment rule, but you're going to be paying 85 points for an Overlord. You've got limited units for this rule, so like we said, Lichguard, that's just one unit there. Triac Praetorian to Triac Stalker, Necron, Immortals and Warriors can be done. The Command Barge doesn't actually have the keyword, does it? Let's check that. I'm checking a few things today. I don't believe the Command Barge actually has the Overlord keyword. It doesn't, so the Command Barge doesn't actually apply. But you've got the two Overlords, Trazyn and Imhotep. Do they count? Let's have a look at that. I know I've done this in the past, but you do so many videos that you just can't remember stuff. Let's have a little check. Imhotep hasn't got it, and Trazyn hasn't got it. So none of them have it. So Imhotep won't work with this, which kind of sucks. And then what else you got? We've already mentioned the Triac stuff, the Overlords and the Lichguard. Yeah, so there's not actually many units that can use this detachment rule. So it has a little bit of a feel like the Annihilation Legion. There's not enough units, but at least they're not being halved again because it's only melee or shooting and so on. At least this does actually work in melee and at range. We've got the enhancements next, which are very so-so, and they can only be put on Overlords, which we've kind of already mentioned the Overlord tax. If you've not got Overlords, you're doing this detachment wrong. Finally, we get onto the Hypercrypt Legion, which is my personal favourite detachment. Might not be the most competitive in comparatively to the Canoptek Court, or maybe it is now, I don't know. A lot of people are using it. Is it doing well in the tournaments? I can't remember. But anyway, pros. No, forget pros, let's go back a step. What's the detachment rule? It's Hyperphase. Hyperphase is a bit of a janky rule. It took me a week to kind of get my head around a few oddnesses recently, and even then when I did the video there was still one tiny mistake, and I'm really kicking myself. I'll talk about that in a moment. But basically, end of your opponent's turn, you can remove up to 3 units from the battlefield in the 2k list. In fact, it could be 4 with an enhancement, but let's just say 3 for now. Remove them from the battlefield, put them in strategic reserves, and then you can bring them on in your next turn if you want, or leave them in strategic reserves. It's not quite like the Grey Knights where they have to come on. It's not like Demons where they've got to come on with their stratagem. You can keep them in reserves if you want. Now you've got the turn 1 shenanigans. I've put this right at the top there because I need to address this yet again. Let's go through this one more time. So in your opponent's turn, let's imagine they go first. End of their turn, you can pick up your units and put them in strategic reserves. Now because they didn't start on the battlefield, they can actually come back into play in turn 1. That's because of the Leviathan Rules mission pack. It says in the bracketed thing at the bottom, if they started on the battlefield, these rules do not apply. As in, you can't deep strike or you can't come in turn 1. Doesn't apply to them. However, the bit that I'm then missed is they must be deep strike units. They must be deep strike units, or they must have a way of getting onto the battlefield. That's something I missed. I think I used the example of Ghost Arcs, which was really annoying because I was gonna say Death Marks, but I was trying to be a bit different and I said Ghost Arc. Death Marks would have worked because they've got Deep Strike, Ghost Arcs don't. Now the reason they need to be Deep Strikers or maybe using the Cosmic Precision Stratagem is because you need a way of entry. If you're in Strategic Reserves, the only way you can enter is by using the Strategic Reserves rules. That would say turn 2 you can come on from the battlefield edges, not your enemy deployment zone, but it isn't turn 2. Now you could argue that in the new rules commentary, abilities that allow you to be set up on the battlefield in turn 1 will count as if it was turn 2. You can argue that. I don't believe you can though, because it's not an ability to set up. Hyperphasing is an ability to remove you from the battlefield, not an ability to set you up. There's a counter argument with the Cosmic Precision Stratagem because that has some weird wording when you setting them up again, if they're in Deep Strike or Hyperphasing, but they're not being set up. It's really weird. But yeah, I think at this moment in time, that's where I'm at with it. I'm not going to do another video because that's just taking the mick now, but they need Deep Strike or they need to be using the Cosmic Precision Stratagem, because that would be a method of getting them in. Because it's basically like, it's not Deep Strike, but it says you can go anywhere on the battlefield as long as you're 3 inches away from enemy models. So it gives them a way in. Whereas if you're using the Strategic Reserve rules, there's no way in turn 1. It doesn't give you a rule, it doesn't give you a guidance. It doesn't say in turn 1 you can start here or be set up there. It just says turn 2. So rules as written, you simply can't. Oh, right, got that one out the way. You've got the Deep Strike Enhancement, which is very nice because you could have Deep Strike in Wraiths, you can have Deep Strike in Immortals, you can have Deep Strike in pretty much anything as long as you've got a character in the unit, which is cool. You've got loads of movement shenanigans, loads of movement tricks. You've got the Cosmic Precision, as we mentioned just a moment ago, Hyperphasing of course, Deep Strike of course, but you've also got the Monolith. The Monolith gives you the Eternity Gate. There's also stratagems that you can pull a unit aside into your Monolith as soon as you lose a model. There's lots of different shenanigans you can do with the Hypercrypt Legion. You've got very competitive enhancements. We've got the Deep Strike one we've already mentioned, but the Horizon Tyrant for full rerolls if you enter the battlefield. So let's imagine some Necron Immortals hyperphase in, enter the battlefield. They've now got full rerolls to their hit rolls and potentially full rerolls to their wound rolls, because maybe the opponent's unit is on an objective. So full rerolls all round. If you've got a Plasmancer in there as well, 5+ critical hit rolls, you may as well fish for them. Why is there a bit of fluff floating around? Did you see that? Anyway, where were we? Competitive enhancements. You're not locked into certain units like the Annihilation Legion, like the Obeisance Phalanx. You're not locked in. Even the Awakened Dynasty to a degree, because you need characters. You're not locked into anything. Death Marks can do it. Catan can do it, which is one of the points we've got coming up. Anyone can do the hyperphasing ability. We've mentioned Catan, we've skipped ahead, but we'll go back one. Easy to score with units. Because you're hyperphasing in, it's so easy to score secondaries with this detachment, which is why I like it. All the difficult secondaries like Investigate Signal, Engage on all fronts sometimes is hard. Capture enemy outpost, deploy teleport homers, all very easy. Normally you need Death Marks or Ophidian Destroyers or a Hexmark Destroyer to come in, but anyone can do it. Hyperphasing is lovely. That's the pros. What about the cons? This detachment doesn't really amplify the damage. Every single one of the other ones does. The Awakened Dynasty is a +1 to the hit roll. Annihilation Legion gets you into melee in engagement range. You've got the Obeisance Phalanx, which is +1 to the wound roll. And I always forget the fourth one. Have I always forgot? The Canoptek Court, re-rolling your hit rolls. They're all damage amplifiers or getting them into a fight. Whereas the Hypercrypt Legion is more of a movement thing. So it doesn't assist in terms of damage. You can potentially be screened out against high model count armies. If you are off the battlefield and you want to enter 9 inches away, if you're not using the stratagem that is Cosmic Precision, you need a 9-inch bubble. You can get screened out quite easily, so you've got to watch out for that. And finally, primary scoring is an issue for this detachment. If you're taking off 3 units at a time, you need to remember what is actually going to be scoring primaries in your command phase. Because if you're coming back in your movement phase, you've missed your command phase. You're not there. So you need some resilient units, maybe Lich Guard with the shields, maybe your Wraiths, maybe your big stuff like your Monolith. Something needs to stay put on the objectives while the other units are doing their thing. So guys, that is the 5 detachments, pros and cons. You'll have to let me know down in the comments below which detachment is your favourite and why. I might do a poll on the community tab as well. Might do that, you have to remind me. But yeah, guys, thank you all for watching, and we'll talk another time.